Today we are talking about the power of perspective and how changing your perspective can honestly change your life. Welcome back to your Emotional Support Podcast. I'm your host, Noelle, and today we are talking about the magic of perspective, how the way we look at things shapes the way we feel about them, and how just changing that perspective just a tiny little bit can really change so much. So today, one of the things that I'm going to use as my analogy about this change in perspective is a soda fountain. So that is going to be so great or awful, but either way, thanks for hanging in there with me. All right, so let's get to it. The soda machine. Okay. This is my analogy that I use for changing our perspective. Okay. You go to a local fast food restaurant, right? They give you a cup. You walk over, you look at your selections, and you fill your ice up, and then you look at your selections again, or maybe you're the person that always chooses the same thing, but you fill your cup up, right? Okay, so this is what I do. I go and I look at my options and I always choose two different ones and I mix them together. Super weird, all right? And not like gross. Like I don't mix like grape Powerade with like, I don't know, Mountain Dew. Gross. That sounds so gross. Maybe it sounds awesome. I don't know. But the point is that you aren't just taking for granted that the only thing you can get are the selections that they give you. Okay? I do the same thing with dressings at restaurants. Okay? If they say like, oh, what kind of dressing do you want on your salad? I typically say I want ranch and French and I mix them together. I don't know where this came from. I know I'm not the only person that does this, but mix it up. Like it brings so many more options to your world. These are just two examples of things that I do. Also, mayonnaise and barbecue sauce is amazing. Ketchup and mayonnaise, so good. Anyway, I mix things. I don't just take things as they come, okay? Mix it up. And I guess that's the point, is like in life, we can just stare at our options and we can choose one or the other, right? But what if we took a little piece from each and made it our own? And so that's kind of what this is all about, is changing the way we look at things and not just taking for granted that the only options we have are the obvious ones right in front of us. Okay? So the metaphor for that is like you can't always control what's on tap, but you can choose like how you mix it up. Okay? And this is such a huge metaphor for life. You can't control what is thrown at you, right? We can't control other people. Sometimes we can't control things that happen, like the weather, things like that. But if we can kind of take pieces from different areas and different ideas and look at it in a different way, then maybe it doesn't look so bad. Okay? So life isn't about blindly accepting what's handed to you. It's about curiosity. It's about creativity. It's about choice. It's about manipulating things in a way that you don't just kind of that kindergarten anthem, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Okay, well, we can take what we get and we can kind of mold it in a way that works better for us. Okay. All right. So what is perspective? What is it? Perspective is the lens through which we view situations, ourselves, other people, right? It's not about being fake positive. It's about looking at something differently to unlock a new response. Okay, so kind of that reframing. So instead of saying, this is happening to me, you could say, this is happening for me. Or you could say, like, just simply say, this is happening. Okay, it doesn't have to be like a personal affront to you. Instead of saying I failed, you could say like I learned, or I grew, or I was challenged. Instead of saying I have no control, you could say I have choices, even if they're small ones. Okay, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. This is a quote from Wayne Dyer. Okay. So, I mean, and it makes all the sense in the world to me. When we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change, right? It opens doors for us. So, why does perspective matter for self-worth? How we see the world impacts how we see ourselves. Okay. So, the way that we view the things around us has an impact and changes kind of the way that we view our own selves. So self-worth isn't built in perfect circumstances, right? I always talk about we don't strive for perfection. That's not realistic. But self-worth is built on how we interpret imperfect circumstances. Okay, so it's that resilience, it's that working through situations that are not ideal, but that we can kind of manipulate and mold into something that does work. So your self-worth isn't determined by your experiences. It's shaped by your interpretation of them. God, I love this so much. Your interpretation of them is what builds your self-worth, not your experiences, right? I talk about this in when I speak to other people about like my circumstances as a young child, and about how my dad told me that he didn't want me to come back to his house, and just, you know, things about my childhood that were very unfair, and very hurtful and very traumatic. And I don't think that those are the things that made me who I am today, right? It's how I interpreted those situations that made me feel a certain way at one point. I felt very unlovable and very, my self-worth was very low, because I felt like, well, if my dad doesn't want me, if my dad can't love me, then no one can. And so that is how my self-worth was determined, was because of my interpretation of those experiences, right? As an adult, and after doing some really hard work, my interpretation is completely different about those situations. And my interpretation of those experiences are very much based on the fact that I could not control what was going on with him, but I can control how I have grown from that, and how I have become a completely different person from who I was before. Okay. So my self-worth is not hinging on that experience, but how I interpret that experience now, right? So the way that you shift your perspective, you shift your identity, right? I am not looking at that situation in the same way at all anymore. When I was looking at it as my dad doesn't want me and I am not worthy of his love and things like that, then I felt real crummy about myself. I was not lovable to anybody. I didn't feel like the people who liked me for legitimate reasons, because how could they? I was not a lovable, likable person. Okay. Obviously, now I feel very differently about myself and about that situation. I don't feel like I was unlovable in that situation. I feel like my dad didn't know how to love me in the appropriate ways that I needed to be loved. And so the fact that that perspective has changed, my identity and my thoughts about myself are much, much different. I have a much higher view of myself. I know that I am lovable, and that the people in my world love me because I am worthy of love. Okay, so it's really just looking at situations in a different way. Reframing your perspective builds resilience. Okay, if you're able to look at a situation in a different way, then those things that come at you don't come at you as hard, if that makes sense. So how do you do this? How do you practice this perspective shift? So, I mean, what you need to do is you need to kind of sit and think about a perspective that you want to change, or maybe that you don't like, or that you think maybe is negative or gives a negative view of yourself. Okay. So sit with that current thought for a little while and then ask yourself, is there another way to see this? Is there a different way that I could be looking at this situation? Try the soda fountain trick. How can I mix in something new? How can I mix in some hope, some humor, some grace, some possibility? Okay, how can I take this current thought and mix it with something more positive? Okay, like diet soda. Okay, I usually mix the diet soda with something else because, less calories, blah, blah, blah. If you're on the sugar, great sugar debate, okay, I don't like to drink a lot of calories throughout the day. So if I'm at a soda fountain, I usually get diet. Well, diet doesn't taste the best, okay? So if you mix diet if you're like half diet, half cherry Coke, that tastes way better, okay? But it's still not all the calories of the cherry Coke. So if you look at like the current thought as that diet Coke, the one that's like doesn't taste as good, right? You're not as excited about, but then you mix in a little of that cherry Coke, mix in a little of that hope or that grace, okay? How can you make that taste a little bit better, okay? Some things to keep on telling yourself is I'm open to a different view. New perspectives equal new powers, okay? Perspective is like a superpower. If you change the way you look at something, it is completely different. Use your perspective as your superpower, okay? Remix the moment a little bit. If something feels dire, if it feels super negative, think about how can I remix this? How can I change this to look differently? It doesn't change the situation. You're not trying to change and manipulate the situation. You're trying to change and manipulate your thoughts about it, okay? You're trying to change your perspective, reframing that, okay? So just tell yourself, how can I look at this differently? And that's really all you need. And it really will make a huge difference. So just to recap, you're not stuck with the first thought, the first take, the first flavor, right? You're not always stuck with what is just planted right in front of you, okay? You have the ability to make changes and make choices, okay? So here's your challenge for this week. Choose one situation that feels frustrating, makes you feel stuck, or is kind of stale, right? And ask yourself, what is another way to see this? What is a different way to look at this? And then mix it up. Watch how that shifts how you feel. It can even be something tiny, okay? It could be like the way that you do laundry, okay? This is gonna sound dumb, but I used to do my son's laundry and my laundry, right? And it would end up being like 3 loads, okay? Because he's smaller, so I could throw all of his clothes in one load. And then in the summer, it was like, okay, well, we're wearing, like, our clothes are smaller in the summer. We're not wearing big, bulky sweaters and long pants and socks and undershirts and all of that stuff. So in the summer, your laundry load gets less in the Midwest anyway. And so instead of continuing to do 3 different loads, I throw his into mine and mix it together. And so then sometimes I come out with 1 load, okay? Or maybe, sometimes 2 loads, but it cuts my work down. Okay, so just kind of look, that's a really dumb example, but it's just like, how can you look at this a different way to make your life better or make your life easier or just make that situation more palatable? All right. So, today's tip that you didn't ask for but definitely need, life is a soda fountain. You don't have to settle for one soda. Mix something new. You might just change everything. Try it and let me know if you do try the soda trick and what combo you tried and if it was good or terrible. And if it's terrible, I'm sorry. But guess what? You had a new adventure and a new experience. So there you go. That's a change in perspective right there. I am so glad you're here.